Let me tell you about the worst weight cut story that I've had to endure, or at least one of them. This is a fight that I knew was coming up. It was against a guy who I had previously beaten. Shout out if you're watching this. I was not on weight, though I knew about the fight day, I knew all of this. I was still a few kilos over, about 6 pounds. So day of, I have to sauna it out, lose it all, can't drink or eat anything, so severely dehydrated, underfueled. I make weight, but feel like a shell of my human self. Afterwards, I try to replenish my glycogen, sugar, and carbs with about a liter of apple juice because, you know, why not? I do that, whole day I'm practically shitting myself. Round 3, gas out, lose split decision against a guy who I'd previously beaten in a tournament. Then I go outside and I puke it all over the parking lot. Genuinely, there was me, a stall next to me, completely covered in puke, and then there was a truck right next to them. I felt bad for whoever the driver was because they were gonna have to walk through my puke. Anyways, this taught me something that no textbook ever will, and that's how important nutrition actually is. It is the foundation of everything. Your recovery, your performance, how you act, your mood, literally everything. Foundational concept is nutrition matters. Anyways, prioritize your nutrition. So this is everything I've learned in 6 years of being a personal trainer and strength conditioning coach in about 15-20 minutes. I don't know, however long the video is, you can see. That made me feel like pretty shit. So I had a few other weight cutting stories. I did a similar thing with chocolate milk, one of the best post-exercise drinks you could have. So I thought it'd be good for refueling. Same thing, I puked it all up in the parking lot, probably shot myself too. That was also not a go. There's a few times where I had to lose so much weight in the sauna the morning of the amateur fight because I was 5'7" right now, not super tall, but I had so much fat on that I fighting at cruiserweight, you know, against these giants. I was cutting down to cruiserweight, so naturally if I didn't cut weight, I'd be a heavyweight, which is kind of crazy, especially if you look at me. That was not advisable and was definitely hindering my performance and my boxing capabilities. Since cutting weight, you know, I'm down about 35, nearly 40 pounds. My performance is significantly better. I'm much faster, much more explosive, power-wise. Strength-wise, I'm definitely not nearly as strong as I once was because I was that weight from rugby, so I bulked all the way up, be a good hooker, and just kind of stayed up there and struggled to get back down after spending several years of just putting on that weight. All this stuff, it's all things that I didn't realize at the time, but the issue was my relationship with food because I was so used to just putting so much food on. And then I also had felt as though whenever I saw something at a store, you know, I kept saying, yeah, tomorrow will be the day.
There is no tomorrow. There is no tomorrow.
Tomorrow will be the day. It never was the day. Tomorrow never came. My idealized version of tomorrow or next week where I said, okay, that's when I'm gonna stop doing this. This is when I'm gonna start eating better, when I'm gonna fix my nutrition, when I'm gonna cut down and get under 80 kilos, all these things that I told myself, it never happened. And that's because of my relationship with food. I felt as though I didn't have an abundance of food. I felt as though because I only had that last day before I had to lock in, as they say, I overate and I binge ate because I felt as though after then I was gonna have an absence of food and of good food. And that led me to this spiral into, it was a reoccurring cycle where I would binge eat, tell myself I'd stop, and I'd maybe stop for a couple days, but I'd binge eat again, and it would just happen over and over. It was a reoccurring cycle. It was gruesome for the mind. It really led to almost character assassination.
Don't eat this. I ate that. Don't drink that. I drank it. And these all just infiltrate my mental strength. Little defeats instead of wins.
Because I wasn't living up to my full potential. So today I will give you guys the guide on how you can actually optimize your nutrition. But before any of that, I have this disclaimer in this personal story. Before you do anything logistically, emotionally, you need to make sure that you're not going to get in the same path that I did and be over obsessive to one end. Because if you're over obsessive on either ends of either overeating or undereating, it can end either way. And I was sort of in between. I would go a week without eating, a full week fast, and then I would binge eat every day. So I was on both ends of the spectrum, which ultimately led me to being fat because of the giant yo-yoing. So that's the number one most important before the rest. Let's get into the actual video. What your nutrition is meant to do is very simple. It's meant to fuel your recovery, your performance, and protect your brain and body longer term. And it all starts with understanding the basics, macronutrients. There are 3 main macronutrients: carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. Don't let me forget the most important one, alcohol. My bad on that, gang. Now, before I break each one down, most people get this wrong and they think of macros as a diet tool, something you track to lose weight. However, when it comes down to it, macros are there to optimize. When it comes down to gaining or losing weight, it's all about the calories. As much as people say, oh, there's this and this and that. Laws of thermodynamics, everyone knows it. You eat less, you lose more. You eat more, you gain more. However, for combat athletes, they're almost as though they're a performance lever. It is going to be able to protect your brain against neurodegenerative disease. It's going to help your recovery and help you maintain lean muscle mass, especially during brutal weight cuts and when you're in fight camp, as well as make sure that in round 3, you are not gassing from not enough carbs, not enough energy. So make sure you know what each macro does and how to use them, which we'll go into now. Starting off with protein. All right, starting off with the most well-known macronutrient and the most talked about, protein. It's the most hyped for a reason. It does a lot of amazing things. It's necessary for muscle protein synthesis, maintaining and repairing muscle tissue, and cellular repair. So protein is incredibly valuable. Every drill, every sparring session, everything you do, your muscles are firing. So if you're not getting enough adequate protein, you're dealing with a lot of damage with not enough fuel to help repair said tissue. Think of it like a construction crew that after each training session comes in and helps repair you to be stronger than it was before. That's protein. So how much? About 0.7 to 1 gram of protein per pound is going to be optimal according to our current studies. This may change down the line. There's lots of studies going for more or less. However, this is what I'm going to recommend today. 0.7 to 1 gram of protein per pound, or just keep it real simple if you're in kilos, about 1 gram per kilo. That's slightly on the higher end, but that's going to make sure that you're getting enough protein per day. So if you're 170 pounds, that's going to be anywhere from 120 all the way up to 170 grams of protein. Make sure you're hitting at least 100 grams of protein every day. It should not be that hard. Now, what does this actually look like in the real world? That's going to be about 200 grams of chicken breast, or which is roughly 46 grams of protein, 3 whole egg, 18 grams of protein. We got 200 grams of Greek yogurt, which is about 17 grams of protein. That's my way to go for protein. Greek yogurt, another amazing way of getting protein. And finally, 1 scoop of protein powder is going to be anywhere from 20 to 30 grams of protein. Super easy way of getting protein in. That's why it's such a rampantly popular supplement. Easy, cheap, best way to get protein in, arguably. Anyways, that's over 100 grams of protein right there. If you just get some yogurt, get some protein powder, some eggs and chicken, there's your day of protein. All right, on to the next macro. We have carbohydrates. Arguably the most important macronutrient, especially for athletes, is carbs. The reason for that is that carbs is what fuels you. Imagine if you think of a car, carbs are essentially the fuel we put in the car. If we run out of fuel or we're running low on fuel, the car is not going to run as efficiently as it could. Similarly, if you have a sports car and you're putting in cheap gas, cheap petrol, and you're not putting in the performance or special gas, it's not going to run the same way either. So we need to make sure we are optimizing the carbohydrates we're getting in and how we source those carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are extremely demonized and are under a lot of hate constantly online. However, as much as it can be beneficial for some demographics to avoid carbohydrates all out, especially if you're on extreme weight loss journeys, if you are an athlete or fighter, you can't really do this. You need to be maintaining your carbs because that's what's going to fuel your glycogen. That's what fuels your performance. If you are not having carbs, round 3 is going to feel a lot harder than otherwise. If you had properly fueled up on some complex carbs and then some higher, faster to digest carbs pre-exertion. So to keep it really simple, there's 2 types of carbs. As mentioned, one is going to be complex carbs. Think of complex carbs as we got oat, rice, sweet potato, pasta, whole grain bread. There's some nuance to what I just said, but we won't go too in depth on that. And then for some fast carbs, we have bananas, white rice specifically, dates, rice cakes, honey, maple syrup. Shout out to you Canadians. And sports drinks, any sort of sugary substance. The simple rule is that complex carbs build the base for your glycogen stores, and your fast carbs is what's going to be able to propel you before you actually exert yourself, whether it's in training or a fight competition, etc., to perform at your best. For the amount, you're gonna want anywhere from 45 to 55% of carbohydrates. Now, what that equals to, again, that 170-pound fighter, which is 77 kilos, by the way, is gonna be 45 to 55% of carbohydrates, which is about 385 to 540 grams of carbohydrates. That's gonna be on harder days. On lighter days, you may want to bring it down to having 385 as the higher end of your carbohydrates, a bit of carb cycling, so you're not over intaking carbohydrates on the days where you're more at rest is probably optimal. You don't need carbs on a day where you're not doing anything. Fats. Fats often get lumped into being demonized and hated because fat, it says in the name, it's gonna make you fat. However, fats are essential for not only hormonal regulation, especially for women, but also protecting the brain against neurodegenerative disease. And in a sport, any sort of contact sport, but especially fighting, we are taking so many subconcussive blows that CTE is practically inevitable. Some sort of cognitive decline is bound to happen. And that's almost something you have to accept as a fighter. However, we can do our best to minimize this risk and minimize cognitive decline that you will inevitably face as a fighter by optimizing your fats, omega-3s, omega-6s. I personally take a fish oil, a pretty good fish oil for added fats. Ideally, you can get that from natural sources. However, fish is expensive as hell. I'm sure you guys know that. Tuna's good, but you don't want all that mercury. If you don't want your testosterone and estrogen, cortisol, etc., all being out of whack, make sure you're getting good fats in. Some other examples are meats, you know, some fatty meats. Pretty much any animal product with fat is going to be good. Things like pork may not be the best for you. Obviously, deep fried chicken, that fat or chocolate is not good for you. However, avocado, eggs, beef, all this stuff, especially fish, genuinely anything with omega-3s, omega-6s are going to be the best, but all of these fats are going to be extremely good for you. Even nuts. Nuts are another amazing way of getting some healthy fats in. Make sure you don't neglect this. Nutrient timing. When do you take these nutrients? When do you take these macros? And how can you use it to optimize your performance? Now, let's start off with some very simple, we'll say, measurements. So about 2 to 3 hours out, you're gonna want some heavier complex carbs. Again, think of certain rices, pastas, potato, and some sort of protein. This is your performance foundation for the session or competition. You're gonna wanna avoid fats close to training because they will or may make you lethargic, and it's not really worth having in your stomach when you're jumping around, fighting, doing whatever stuff you guys do. Fats take the longest to digest. They're very slow to digest, and it's the last thing you want sitting heavy in your stomach when you're trying to perform at your best ability. It makes you lethargic, as mentioned. Anyways, on to that 30 to 60 minutes. You're gonna wanna keep it quite simple. So fast digesting carbs only. Please think of things like maple syrup, shout out Canada. We got honey, we got rice cakes, bananas, or any sort of fruit. You can have some dates or sports drinks. Those are gonna be the easiest ways of fast digesting carbs for your session. Post-training, you're always going to want to optimize carbs and protein. Fats can come later down the line, but whether you're refueling or you just had a hard session, the most important is to refill your glycogen systems, which means you need glucose. Glucose turns into glycogen. You need fat carbs. So this is why chocolate milk is the best thing to take post-training. Now, hear me out. The reason for this is because it has a perfect 3-to-1 carb to protein ratio, which is optimal for refilling your glycogen stores while also providing enough protein for muscle protein synthesis and repairing your cellular and tissue damage. I cannot express how amazing chocolate milk is. On top of that, it also just tastes pretty damn amazing. I would not recommend this after a weight cut and weigh-in because I did that once and I puked all over the parking lot after my flight, as mentioned earlier in this video. However, aside from that, if it's just a normal training session, chocolate milk's the best thing you can have post-training, arguably. Not only that, but its protein is also one of the highest, considering that it's casein, which is one of the best amino acid profiles for protein. Some other examples for some good post-training combos are white rice and chicken, protein shake with a banana, or again, chocolate milk. It solos S tier. Another thing I forgot is you're going to want to get hydration pre and post exercise. So make sure you get your electrolytes in, supplement however you get your electrolytes in, salt your foods. I would highly recommend just salt your foods. If you're an athlete, salt the heck out of anything. And Now you get your electrolytes in, things taste better. It's just the way to go. Get your electrolytes in. So if you want to avoid being like me, here's what you can do. Let's say you're 2 weeks or more out from a fight. What you can do, which ideally, this is when you should be doing it. If you're off camp, this is when you deal with anything that's required, whether you're putting on weight, taking off weight. This is where you deal with that sort of stuff, not when you're 2 weeks out. Find your basal metabolic rate. I prefer using the Harris-Benedict equation. I always use that one. Just search a BMR calculator, search it up online, put in your stats, and it's going to give you an approximate for how many calories that you would lose if you did nothing. If you sat down all day, did nothing, that's how many calories you would lose. Then you can do some calculators online. I'll probably automatically put it in if you give your activity level. Then from there, try it out and just adjust week to week. See, am I losing weight? Am I gaining weight? If it's going in the direction you want, stick to those many calories. If you're losing too much or too little, then you may need to adjust. If you're losing any more than half a kilo or 1 pound a week, unless if you're quite overweight, then you may want to lower the caloric deficit that you're in, or same thing, if you're gaining more than that, you probably also want to lower the caloric surplus you're in, because otherwise you'll just get fat like I was. If you are under 2 weeks, so let's say you're a week out of your fight, what's something you can start doing? Reducing your fiber intake is going to easily lose. In my first fight, it was at 80 kilos. I think I was 83 kilos. I just cut out fiber. Within a few days, I think I was 79. Easy. Cut out your fiber and limit your fiber, especially if you're getting enough fiber. If you guys aren't getting enough fiber, which I definitely was because I was aware of having enough fiber for digestion reasons, it may not help as much. So test it out, ideally before your fight. Test any of these weight cutting things before you're actually in fight camp. You don't want to be testing new things on fight week. Reducing your fiber is a super easy way of losing a few kilos. Yeah, 2 to 3 kilos, that's 5 to 6 pounds. Easy weight loss. Another thing you can do is limiting carbohydrate and sodium. However, we talked about how important carbs are, and electrolytes are equally as important. So ideally, if we can lose most of the weight by fat loss and then reducing fiber, that's going to be ideal, because then we don't need to cut out our electrolytes and our glycogen stores, as well as just severely underfueling ourselves.